And it is 7 o'clock. Time to call to order the planning board meeting of May 25th, 2021. This is a remote meeting through the Zoom platform. And we will start off with a roll call. And as usual, I will need you to verbally signify your presence as I call your name. And start with Carrie Lamson.
Present.
Okay. Natasha Edwards.
Present.
And associate.
And associate. That's Abby.
Hey, cutie.
And Mike Rowan.
I'm here.
Okay. Jonathan Clayton.
I'm here.
Okay. Jim Johnson.
Yeah, I'm here.
Tom Dorsey.
Here.
And Sarah Walker.
Present.
Howie Labiner.
I'm here.
And Prayag Patel is also with us, I see, tonight. And
Miranda has finals tomorrow, so she's not going to be here.
That's a good reason. Okay. All right. First order of business tonight is the review and approval of the minutes of the April 27th, 2021 meeting. Does anyone have any questions or comments or corrections for the minutes? Okay. Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion we approve the minutes.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the April Planning Board meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Natasha Edwards. We'll do roll call vote, starting with Jim Johnson.
Yes.
Tom Dorsey.
Yes.
Natasha Edwards.
Yes.
Carrie Lamson.
Yes.
Jonathan Clayton.
Yes.
And Mike Rowan.
Yes.
And I also vote yes, so that's a unanimous vote. Minutes are approved. And we'll move on to our first item of business, which is rezoning application 2020-725. Nope, excuse me. Wrong page. That one sounded a little too familiar. Okay. Application 2021-1, fence height text amendment. Rob, is this one yours?
It is, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Planning Board. And let's talk a little bit about fences, of course. It's a fun topic, I know, and everyone's thrilled. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a short presentation. I know everyone was there for the public hearing, so I'm just going to give you guys some updates that we've made to the proposed text since the public hearing. Let's see, I'll pull my screen up here. All right. Okay, so just as a reminder, staff was directed by the Board of Commissioners to look at the possibility of allowing fences that would be higher than 4 feet in a front yard setback along major road corridors in order to give some residents relief from traffic noise and increased privacy. So after looking at a number of different communities and coming up with a draft for the public hearing, we had a number of concerns and issues that were raised. One was the proposed 15 foot setback was too large and should be reduced. A materials list should be provided so that people know what they can make their fences out of. Different types of landscaping could be allowed. We were asked to look at speed limit and possibly number of lanes of thoroughfares to be considered as a criteria. And the number of applicable roads, if you remember during the public hearing, we had maybe half a dozen roads that were eligible for this proposed text amendment, and that it was felt that that was too many. So, and then additional setback for gates and driveways. So staff has come up with some changes to the text, and I just want to go over them with you briefly before I show you the proposed text. So based on the issues that were brought up at the public hearing, we're recommending a reduction of the fence setback from the right-of-way, which was 15 feet to 8 feet. And 8 feet is the size of our planting strip, which is sort of the area between the curb and the sidewalk. Limit the application to Pineville Matthews Road, Matthews Township Parkway, Matthews Min Hill Road, basically Highway 51, with sections that have 4 or more lanes of traffic instead of all major thoroughfares. We added language to include walls because this section of the code applies to walls as well, not just fences. And added a 20-foot setback for gates and driveways in order to allow a vehicle to pull in without having its rear end sticking out into the right of way, and specifically requiring the fence or wall to be made of wood or brick. We did not make any changes to the landscaping requirement. We felt that that can be done at the administrative level if the time comes where we need to look at different landscaping options. And we were going to require a no-charge permit from the planning department to ensure compliance so that we can see that folks are the correct setback and in the correct location. So this is the proposed text amendment. The area in red, you'll notice too, if from the last proposal, this is in a little bit of a different format. This format is in keeping with the rest of the UDO, so it fits a little bit better. Again, fences or walls may be up to 6 feet in height in a required front setback if the following criteria are met. The front yard is adjacent to a section of Pineville Matthews Road, Matthews Township Parkway, or Matthews Min Hill Road. Right of way that is 4 or more lanes of traffic. It must be set back at least 8 feet from the right of way. It must be constructed of wood or brick. Driveway gates must be set back 20 feet from the right of way. Evergreen shrubs must be placed an average of every 5 feet of the fence or wall, except in the front of gates. Evergreen shrubs must be at least 24 inches tall at installation, and a permit shall be required from the planning department to ensure compliance with this exception. So I will be happy to take any questions that the planning board might have at this time. I'm going to just leave this up here for the time being, unless you want me to stop screen sharing, but just so everyone can kind of take a look.
Mr. Lansom has his hand raised. And Mr. Dorsey.
First, Carrie.
Thank you. Rob, just a couple of general questions. When we say a 4-foot or 6-foot high fence, how do we measure that? Is that from sea level? Is that the physical length of the boards? What constitutes a 4-foot fence? And the reason for my question would be, why couldn't you just build a berm and put a 4-foot fence on the top of it to achieve 6 feet of privacy?
That's a great question, and we measure from the existing grade. I think that is a possibility that someone could possibly skirt the intent of the ordinance by building a berm and then putting a 4-foot fence on there. But we measure it from the existing grade of the ground.
So, but theoretically, and again, the reason for that question is someone could regrade their property before installing a fence. I mean, I just happen to notice as you drive up like Sardis Road and you're driving uphill, there is significant difference in the heights of the actual height of the top of a fence, given the grade change that happens. Especially if what we're trying to do at this point in time, I just don't understand. We have 1 or 2 exception areas where a homeowner has asked for this change, and we're trying to change a code that would apply to everyone. maybe I shouldn't use the term berm, but why couldn't a gradual gradient change to the property facilitate the same kind of thing without the need to change the code to go from 4 to 6 feet with A through F as exceptions? That's all I'm asking.
Yes. Well, I think you raised a good point, and this is something that we've run into that before, actually, with folks who want to put in a berm and then a 4-foot fence because from privacy exceptions. So I think this is an intent. The intent of this change is to take this into consideration where folks are interested in having an increase in security and privacy if their front yard is on a busy street.
Okay, and I understand that. And maybe where I'm going is that maybe there could be some reference to the street grade, not the property grade, because it's the street appearance that we're all concerned about. So if you're measuring the 4 foot or the 6 foot from street grade, regardless of what the property grade is, that might help minimize the fact that we end up with something with an effective 8 foot height by the time we go 8 feet back onto somebody's property was all. I just want to make sure we're contemplating, how this may in fact get implemented, and are there some boundaries or perhaps some restrictions on total effective height or something that from the street doesn't appear to be significant height. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dorsey has his hand raised.
Tom.
Hey, thanks. Is there a requirement maybe elsewhere that would speak to the design of the fence? And specifically, I've seen instances in other towns where they require that the structural component of the fence be on the inside rather than the outside, just so you have a better view appearance from the street.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do have that in another portion of the code that requires, I'll call it the nice side of the fence to be facing outward. And so we do have that, and that is something that we look for when folks are installing fences.
All right, thanks.
Howie, do you have your hand up there?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Guys, thank you for, it's nice to be here. Rob, I have some questions, and once again, this may be my inexperience with this whole thing. We have this set up so the fence has to be constructed of wood or brick. Do we have anywhere that mandates whether it's unpainted wood or someone can paint their fence purple, for example?
We do
out at the street.
Yes, no, we do not regulate the color of fences.
Okay, and also, do we have anything, if these fences go up in 5-6 years from now, if one of them is literally falling apart, becomes an eyesore, do we have anything else in our toolbox to deal with it at that point?
Yes, we have basically a fence needs to be kept in decent shape. Otherwise, it needs to be replaced. And that's something that we have in as a code enforcement mechanism in the code.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing because I see a lot of people with their hands up.
Okay. A lot of questions on this one. Natasha?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. So is there any sort of how opaque, I guess, or how how much does it screen, I guess? Is it solid? Do we have any, is that part of the other part of the code perhaps too that Tom was asking about?
No, that's a good question. We do not regulate opacity of the fences. So they, right now it could be chain link.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike Rowan?
I guess I'm questioning the intent here. When I read this, we're putting it under the UDO, right? But we're targeting what is basically Matthews Township Parkway. And because, I mean, if it's to be unified, I'd start looking at things like, okay, what are the folks on Monroe Road? What are they up against? That's not 4-lane, but that is a busy road that they may be able to, get some privacy if it's applied properly, or even this McKee Road extension when that goes through. I mean, we're going to be going in between those two neighborhoods eventually, but we got other places that I think kind of fit that. Maybe that Idlewild Road area. Of course, those homes are set back further, but it just seems to me like, and this is more of a statement than a question, it just seems like it's really targeted. Is there any reason that we're going to limit it to those, or do you give people a mechanism to come in and make a request if they kind of fit the same criteria? It just seems to me like it should be, if it's unified, it should be across the board, but that's me.
Well, that's a great question. And we did originally have a number of other roads included in this proposal, but we went back and limited because we heard that from the public hearing that there was, it was too wide. We cast too wide a net, so we're just narrowing it down now. I think the point in some of the other roads you mentioned, I mean, this is in the UDO, so it can always be, we can always add to these roads if we see that there are residents who should have this relief on other roads, 4-lane or otherwise.
Yeah, maybe that's a good way to approach it, just so that they can have that option. And of course, it gives us control, right, at that same point.
Jim?
I may be in a minority here, but I kind of find the 6-foot front yard fence a little bit unattractive for a town, really. And some of the pictures we saw at the public hearing, I thought were fairly unattractive. And so just from an aesthetic perspective, I'm not sure I'd want to open up the UDO to a large number of front yard fences that are taller and taller. I was curious about the berm question that we were talking about earlier. And I think that would be potentially a way that people could get around it. It might be more attractive than a 6-foot fence. But the thought I had, and this may be completely out of base, maybe Craig knows something, but if we're trying to build a solution for a single 1 or 2 off problem here, could we not figure out a way to add some, apparently BOA can't do it because it's illegal and, it's not in the zoning code. And so there's no way to make this legal. Is there a way that you could make a conditional district out of anyone that wanted to come in and say, I'm an R15, but I'm going to go apply for a conditional district as an R15 application. I'll submit, here's my site plan. This is what I want to do. The board can look at it. They go, you know what, that's a very attractive fence you're going to build. I think we can live with that. And they approve it. So at that point, they're just like any other conditional district. So we can do that anywhere in the world if we wrote the language within the UDO to apply that to any zoning district, or maybe it's only a certain couple. But I just don't like the idea of opening up our town to this massive long 6-foot fences everywhere. It just makes no sense to me. I just can't see it aesthetically making any sense. I know that's a statement, not a question.
Well, I think if I may, I'd just make a comment about that. Comment is I think there are other people that share that concern, and that's why we've limited it substantially to only residential properties that have front yards facing Highway 51 that are 4 lanes or greater. So it is very targeted right now. And as Mr. Rowan said, maybe that's not fair. Maybe we should let other people do it. But at the time, this is kind of it's a new territory. So we want to just step lightly, I think.
It's kind of like trying to split the baby, though, a little bit, too. It's like, it's no good way to do it sometimes.
Yeah. Mike?
In point of clarity, Rob, it is, I'm kind of following in line with Jim. And my point being that all those pieces would be, because it looks like, we're very well targeting that one strip under a UDO, where I kind of would agree with Jim. I'd like, maybe if we could do it in a conditional zoning, and you take it on a case by case basis, maybe it's a little more manageable. I don't know.
Tom?
I'd like to maybe to add on also, I'd like to see something that had more of a uniform height of the fence rather than 4 to 6. You know, how would we feel if one person builds a 4 foot, the neighbor builds a 5, and the neighbor builds a 6, and the next one builds a 4? It's going to look kind of strange. A thought.
Yes, I can see how that would be discombobulating, to say the least. I think right now anyone can build a 4 foot fence. So if you're going up to 6, and we have a number of 6 foot fences along these corridors because they're in the people's rear yards. So keep that in mind that this is a front yard kind of deal, whereas someone right now, if their rear yard or their side yard faces the thoroughfare, 6 foot fence is allowed.
What's that? So is that Sardis Cove? Is that what that is? I think. Is that the name of that? It's the neighborhood right after you turn off 51 onto Sardis Road, right?
Yes. Gosh, I can't remember the name of the neighborhood, but that's what you're talking about.
It was an infill project.
But isn't the problem or the challenge there that what appears to be their backyard is really their front yard because of the alley behind it?
Yes, in that particular neighborhood, the front yard is they're using as their rear yard, basically, because their rear yard is fed by an alley. That's correct.
Yeah. My concern is primarily aesthetics. When we saw the picture, I think it was from Raleigh area, a couple of weeks. That got my attention in that it could turn into a really ugly, literally situation. Because wooden fences in most cases are built by professional fencing companies, and other cases they're not. They're not done well. They're not done aesthetically pleasing. I guess if we could really lock down exactly what type of fence would be approved, or if we could do it on a case-by-case basis based on the permit that was applied for, we could maybe dictate very closely what that fence is going to be looking like, because a brick wall, basically, more than a fence, is probably going to look very, very nice. A wooden fence can look anything from very professional to just terrible, and anything in between. There needs to be some type of consistency in the way it looks. If you're looking down 2 blocks of Highway 51, hopefully you'd see a unified front in fencing there. And if there's anything we could do to ensure that, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with it. To Mike's point is, taking a look at East John as it's heading to 485, that's certainly a high traffic area. Obviously, it's not 4 lanes. And putting or allowing fences 6 feet high on both sides of that road would create more of a wall look than it would be a fencing look, which once again, aesthetically is not going to be good at all. So there's lots of danger in this. And I feel for the people who are in the situation of needing to have some privacy there facing 51. And I hope that we can find a way to make that happen for the people who want it. But there's just I would feel more comfortable if we could really dictate exactly what type of fence gets installed. Jonathan?
Hey, so just a question for Rob. It's just from my understanding. So this is about their front yards, right? So if these homes that we're talking about, if it was their backyards, this wouldn't really matter. They could put up that 6 foot fence regardless. Is that right or wrong?
That is correct.
So I don't have a problem with it. So if it's all about, if these houses were flipped around, we would still be seeing a 6 foot fence. This just happens to be their front yard. I mean, I don't see a problem with this. I mean, I get the reservations on what might happen to their fences, but It just happens these houses happen to be facing this busy road. If they were flipped around the other way, we would have a 6-foot fence there. So I just, I get the problems, but I mean, it's unfortunate they're facing this way, which is, I think we should help them out.
Jim?
So that was an infill. They had a long, skinny lot, and I would bet that the zoning required them to face the road. So they built a driveway, a shared driveway with flag lots in the back. But the road that they had to be their address and everything were on was that road. So they had to face them that way. So if you choose that, I mean, you kind of chose, that's the front of my house facing that road. It's not like they didn't know that was going to happen when they were building it.
I mean, that's true. Sure. I mean, I get that point, but I
see your point too. I believe in the one lot, and that's what I'm trying to get across in my mind. It's like, do we change the whole planning board zoning here for the world here, or do we just try to fix the one problem we have?
Jim, right. I like your point. I mean, it would be nice to go that route. I'm not sure of the process or how much that takes. I definitely would side with that approach, because I get it. Because wood fences, they look awful. They're different styles, might be different heights. I mean,
an ugly
brick is really nice, but super expensive. So what's that, Jim?
I said an ugly 4-foot fence is a lot easier to tolerate than an ugly 6.
I completely agree, but I do get the noise that they must get all the time from that busy road. So I get Mike's point, but I mean, unfortunately, that part's not on this right now, since we're just dealing with Pineville Matthews Road 51. So, but anyway, that's just my take on it. If I had to choose one option, I would choose what Jim said. I think that's the best approach, but that's not what we're talking about. So, yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'll shut up now.
Carrie?
Thanks, Mike. I just want to come back for a second, and I'm sitting here. You have a sample photo up of Cary Parkway, and to the point where, Rob, we're not controlling the finish of the fence. We're not saying it needs to be sealed. We're not saying what color it needs to be. We're giving all of this variability to people, regardless of what height the fence is. We don't manage that, as I understand it, whether it's a 6-foot fence today or a 4-foot fence, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
All right, and so we're facing exactly what this photo shows us, which is one of those fences is ugly gray and it has been there forever, and another one appears to be slightly taller and is newer. And I look at the landscaping on this photo, and those things, there's no way those things are going to grow up to cover that fence in 15 years. I'm talking about the Cary Parkway example. So again, I'm not comfortable that a 24-inch shrubbery is going to do anything in the near term to help assuage the aesthetic problems of having fences running down these highways. I'm not a fan of making a change. Quite honestly, I don't believe that there's a significant enough difference between 4 and 6 feet to help noise on a 4-lane highway not carry over 2 foot of that fence and into the back of that house. I think there are other more natural ways to do it. I think they should do it within their own setbacks. And I just can't get my arms around trying to legislate all of these exceptions for a couple of areas in town that right now appear to have high traffic noise and some inconvenience related to them, without opening up Pandora's box about how this is all going to look, even worse than where we are today, if we're not going to regulate that it can't be pink and it can't have an ad on it and it can't be, I just think there's a lot more that we haven't even addressed when it comes to standard fencing, as you would if you were in an HOA, where if you have a regulated neighborhood, you are controlling those things, particularly for the aesthetics. Now, I know the town can't do that, but it just seems that, even this little bit of a crack that we might be discussing could simply continue to open up a box of challenges that we may face going forward. Again, I apologize. I know that was a statement as well.
Natasha?
Isn't part of the issue too, though, not just noise, but also, a little bit of safety for those residents with kids and animals and things like that too? Isn't that, if I remember correctly from that original town hall meeting? maybe I'm off on that, Rob. I don't-
No, you're correct. There was a concern for safety of children and animals, and a 4-foot fence was considered to, be not adequate. But you're correct. There was safety concern.
Rob, do you know if we've had any other applications for this type of situation? I know that the homeowner there at the corner of Sardis and 51 is basically, I mean, not that it's a problem. His application started this conversation.
Yeah, that's correct. Right now we don't require fence permits. So this is kind of something that if, however, we do enforce, and there have been a number of instances where the code enforcement officer has cited people for having 6-foot fence in their front yards. It's not necessarily on a major thoroughfare, but we have had people take down their fence from 6 foot to 4 foot.
Okay. Because if I remember correctly, too, the applicant installed a wooden fence because he was basically beyond the brick wall that had been constructed probably by the builder. So everybody else in that section was covered the day they moved in. It's just one unfortunate homeowner.
There's actually a couple, just like maybe I'll say 1.5 of the yards aren't covered by the brick wall. So yes, but you're correct. It is sort of comes up short, so to speak.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions?
No pun intended. I'm kind of on the fence on this one because I understand both sides. I mean, I think my main concern really is more for the safety of people and animals and those residents. So that's part of the reason why I'm definitely a little bit more for it at this time. But I also don't disagree with anything in terms of aesthetics and concerns about that. So, and again, to Jonathan's point there, they're already allowable for this condition in other, if it were a rear yard, essentially. But again, I do completely agree with Jim and his comments about concerns about, we don't want these fences just lining our major thoroughfares either. That's just my comment, I guess. Nothing more, no questions.
Jonathan?
One final question. I guess it's for Rob, kind of you bringing up the point of he already installed that fence. So what happens if this doesn't go through? Is he going to be made to knock it down to 4 feet? I mean, is that what's going to happen?
That's what's going to happen.
Well, okay, I'm for this. I don't want that guy to have to get out there and tear down this fence, put up a 4-foot fence. It doesn't do any good. So, so I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about it. So,
Tom?
Maybe one more. My recollection that another part of this conversation had to do with the setback requirements. Since technically it's his front yard, he's got a much different setback from the road than he would if it was his rear yard. And I think there was some discussion at the public hearing about not only our normal setbacks, but it might have been a larger setback because it's on 51. Am I wrong on that?
No, yeah, I think you're right on with that. Their front yard setback is it's like 100 feet. It's pretty big. And that was just done on the plat that it is also an RVS zoning district. So it's a conditional zoning district that, where setbacks can vary. So that is, there is substantial front yard setback.
So even if we allowed the, whatever fences are required or asking for, the reality is it would be so far back. I mean, he's not going to be happy with just a fence. It seemed like he wanted relief on the setback requirement also. And we're not addressing that here. So
We're not addressing that here. That's correct.
But are we? Because didn't we just state that? I thought it said it had to be is that at a minimum 8 foot? Is that what you're saying? And then you have to meet the setback requirements in your current zoning. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, it would be a minimum of 8 foot setback from the right of way in this proposal, with the landscaping, and if their front yard setback was smaller than say 100 feet, I mean, you can have a 6 foot fence if it's not in the front yard setback. I think that was part of the issue.
One thing that I've been thinking about here is if this eventually passed through town council and we restricted it and left it at basically Highway 51 only, how many houses are we really talking about? I don't know if anybody's ever looked at that, and I don't know if it really matters, but there can't be more than a few who could have a need to put a fence up anyway.
I think that's a good point, Mr. Chair. And we can definitely take a look at that, because this is, again, only houses that are fronting Highway 51. So a lot of rear yards on 51, a lot of side yards, but I don't necessarily have a number count for you at this time.
Yeah, but most of the people who wanted to put up a fence, if they had a backyard, they would have already done it, or they could today. Mike?
Well, I will say most of those homes that meet that condition are right in that little corridor, right? Because, I mean, the road's expanding. That's that one little tunnel all the way from Fullwood up through, I guess, up past Courtney. So that's where most of those homes actually reside. Now, I know when they do the widening project, I think a handful of those will be raised, but prior to that, some of them, I mean, guess what? They're going to be prime candidates to put a fence up, and it'd be a 6 foot fence. Those that remain. Just a thought.
And Rob, our duty on this one is to not actually make a decision, but our duty is to make a recommendation, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions?
Again, I just want to remind everyone, there are an awful lot of homes from Matthews Township Parkway to Idlewild Road that front 51. All right. And none of those today have fencing, but if we allow this, they could have up to 6 feet. Let's not just think about the Sardis Road side of this. When you say 51, it runs all the way to the roundabout. And again, there are a number, especially of older homes, that while they do sit back, they'd be allowed to be putting up a fence within 8 feet of the right of way, all down that side of the road on both sides, from basically the high school out, if you will, but in that section where we still narrow down to 1 lane in each direction, but is planned to be 4 lanes. So if we widen Idlewild as it's planned, it will allow those individuals, when we put the 2 lanes and the median in, if we do this, it would allow them to add fencing as high as 6 feet all down that corridor, if I understand things correctly. Rob?
If it is a 4 lanes at that time, at that area, Yes.
It is planned, obviously, it's on the books, it's planned that we will widen 4 lanes from where Matthews Township Parkway ends right now at the cutoff to go to the school all the way to the roundabout and through the intersection with a buffer median in between. So there'll actually be 5 lanes there.
Jonathan, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, I definitely see Carrie's point to that, but it's going to be a long time before that even happens. I don't know when DOT is going to get around to expanding 51 all the way out. I know they're planning on blowing out that roundabout and putting just a big, intersection there, 4 lanes all the way out. But what's the time frame on that? I don't want to limit these people's. I mean, if they did that, some of those homes are going to be bulldozed through anyways because they're pretty close. So,
Howie, you're muted.
So I'm a little confused. I'm looking at this now. This ordinance is specific to Highway 51. In other words, if Idlewild became a 4-lane road, wouldn't we have to add it to the ordinance as opposed to it automatically kicking in?
No, I wasn't referring to it as Idlewild, Howie. I was referring to 51 running to Idlewild, where Purser Halsey Park is, and all of that section. There are a number of homes. That is still Highway 51, called Matthews Bent Hill Road, but it's Highway 51.
Right. So in other words, if we wanted to add, if another street became a 4-lane highway, we'd have to add that individually, or it would have to be added into separately.
If it wasn't Highway 51, however, right. It is Highway 51.
Right. No, I understand what you're talking about. Thank you. That answers my question.
Tom?
Just a clarification on the comment about DOT and 51. They do have plans to widen this particular section that we're talking about from the Lutheran Church up past the Sardis Road interchange and upward past that. It was supposed to have started next year, but because of their funding challenges, it isn't. Just a thought. I don't know what that would do to the fences and the what's happening around that area, but just another complication.
Jim?
I'm going to go back to something that I guess Rob said, but if this infill was a RVS at the time, that fence was on their site plan. Because I seem to recall there was some issue with that fence, that brick wall, right after they built those homes. It wasn't there, and they added it. And then I don't think it was on the site plan when there was something there about that wall, or was it on the site plan? Could that not be easily addressed by just going back and revising the site plan? I mean, I have a real problem with just opening up, even if it's a crack, the whole UDO to things like this. So I'm going to be against it just on principle that way. It's like, I don't think you want to retailor a little bit of code to try to match one situation and do it that way. I just don't think it's a good idea. And again, the aesthetics are what I object to about it. And that's why we have that. And at the end of the day, the reason we did a 4-foot wall in the front is because it's unappealing to build 6-foot front walls. That's why all the towns do what they do for the most part. But again, if it's an RVS then, and if they had to readdress the wall, I mean, can you not resolve this issue easily just by going down that path again?
So in conditional districts, the board cannot approve a condition that's not otherwise allowed in the Unified Development Ordinance. So if the UDO doesn't somewhere say you can have a 6-foot fence, or is that what you're saying, is make this only applicable to RVS?
No, you could do that, but could you not update the UDO in a way that gives the board the ability to do something like this? And I'm saying you'd have to rewrite something else, not this piece of code, but you'd go, okay, in certain circumstances, the board has a certain amount of variability. And as long as it's a conditional district or a site plan that's been approved by the board, then a fence could go up to say 6 feet. And you can make a list of those things that they have some latitude over. And then you have it set and you're done. And we still haven't let the genie out of the bottle. We haven't tried to rewrite our code for one particular situation. And, you kind of keep some level of control. Matthews has always had I think we had good control, and I think that's why we prospered and done well.
So the only thing similar to that, Rob, and we haven't even explored this avenue, but since you brought it up, we have something called flexible design standards, but it generally relates to like dimensional standards. So in the RVS, you can modify the front setback or a corner side yard. Could it be applicable to fence height? Potentially. I mean, that's a Craig or a Charlie question. We hadn't really contemplated that till you just mentioned it.
But it's not a simple process. Even if we change it, it's going to be a lot of changes. So
yeah, it would be a change to the UDO now, and then it would be taking that subdivision back through the rezoning process to make those modifications, essentially.
In this case.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mike?
Following along with that, are we saying that we could change in the UDO for that district? Is that what we're looking at? I know I heard you say, Craig, that would be difficult, but I think it would give us the controls that I know I would be more comfortable with to go forward. But I also want to see if, try to find any way possible to help rectify this gentleman's issue. So I like the idea. If it does mean a little more work, that's what it is. You go back through, we change it in the RVS, and then give us that flexibility to allow him to do what's right for his property too, but allowing the town to maintain control in this area.
And I assume the Board of Adjustments decision basically said there's no one-offs here.
Right. The Board of Adjustment just didn't find that this case, actually there are 3 cases, did not meet the 4 criteria. There was no particular hardship. The lot was not a peculiar shape, and I can't remember the other 2, but off the top of my head, that's what the Board of Adjustment found.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Do we have a motion to either recommend approval or rejection of the text amendment? I think we've got some pretty solid thinking on both sides, and I think everybody's pretty much made up their mind whichever way it may be. We just need to get somebody to voice that in a motion. No motion from anyone. Somebody's not going to make a stand. This is a peculiar situation.
I will I'll go ahead and make a motion. And
okay. Thank you, Mike.
I have to agree that this is probably the most conflicting motion I made because I think we're going to go against it from the negative, but I understand the need. Let me go find it. All right. For the motion of, what is this, consistency with local adopted growth policies? Is that one? No.
Yes.
No, it's land on use on plan.
That's you know what? I
don't think I see it.
No, you're right. You don't, because I failed to put one in your packet, but I have one that I will share on my screen.
All right, I'll go to that.
All right.
Right. For zoning motion 2021-1, the amendment to the UDO, I found it to be inconsistent with the text amendment, is inconsistent with the land use plan because it selectively gives the right to have a 6-foot fence in the front yard setback on certain properties and not others. It is not reasonable. The text amendment is not reasonable because it only applies to one thoroughfare corridor.
So you're recommending denial?
Recommending denial.
Correct.
We have a motion to deny the application for Mike Rowan. Tom?
A second.
Okay. We have a motion from Mike Rowan, a second from Tom Dorsey, and we will do a verbal roll call vote starting with Jim Johnson.
Approve.
Approve the rejection, right?
Approve the rejection. I'm not sure I would say that.
Yeah. Okay. Tom Dorsey?
Approve.
Natasha Edwards?
No.
Okay. Jonathan Clayton?
No.
Okay. Mike Rowan?
Approved.
Carrie Lamson?
Approve.
Okay. And I vote to reject. So that passes the motion fails 4-3.
Are you sure?
That doesn't sound right.
All right, let's go through again. We have Jim voting to pass the rejection, Tom Dorsey voting to pass the rejection, Natasha Edwards voting to reject the rejection, Jonathan Clayton voting to reject the rejection. So we're 2-2 right now. Mike Rowan?
Approved. Yeah.
Okay, so we're now 3-2 to reject and to approve the rejection, which leaves us with Carrie, who votes to approve the rejection. All right, that's 4-2. I vote to approve the rejection, so that's 5-2. So the motion passes 5-2. Kind of unusual. We have that much discussion and that much of a difference. So, but great discussion. So the vote is to recommend rejection of the application. Okay.
Okay, and I wanted to mention something. I was looking at our code, and I have to hand it to Jim for his idea. So regardless of how this plays out, Rob, and I had not contemplated flexible design standards. I didn't even looked at that part of our code, but it does reference fences and walls. I'm not sure what the applicability is here, but it is something along the lines of what Jim discussed is permitted in our flexible design standards process. So depending upon
works out.
So that's another option I think the board has to consider, after the discussion tonight. So thank you for bringing that up, Jim.
And in the meantime, he could still keep that fence there for now, right? No one's going to make him tear it down until there's some final. I mean, how does that operate? I guess that's another subject, but I'd like to see him be able to try to win this one just in a different way.
Well, Rob and I will certainly look at it. So thank you for bringing up that concept.
And I guess we would need to make sure there is a comment or a note in the minutes saying there's another option to explore. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Next up, administrative amendment, Windsor Square. Darren, it's been a while.
Yeah, I didn't see y'all last month. Thank you, Chair. Give me one moment. Okay. So first up is the administrative amendment over at Windsor Square. So this property is zoned B1CD. That is our shopping center district. A lot of times these administrative amendments are handled at staff level. However, whenever there's more than 2 note changes or drawing changes, then it's required to come before planning board for approval. These are minor modifications, some minor modifications, primarily to the site plan and then to the elevations. So for the elevations, the changes mainly reflect around the entrance of the building. They are making it a bit more symmetrical and adding peaks instead of just the flat top. And then there are some change of colors and I believe some materials. And then to the site plan, the only change that's happening that is in front of the building, they're actually adding a little pull-off lane for for curbside pickup. We do have a consistency statement. So this is the currently approved site plan for Windsor Square. This is the site with the gas station, and then this would be 2nd and Charles. This is for the former J.C. Penney building. This J.C. Penney was the only store inside the shopping center that had elevations attached to it. None of the other storefronts have any type of or need elevation approvals. And these were the architectural drawings that were approved for the J.C. Penney's. So this darker gray area, this is a new, I guess, layer you could say to the front of to the front facade. They're adding that to make it a bit more symmetrical, and then you can also see where they're adding new window not windows, but new peaks to the top of the building. And the color is being changed to more of a gray tone. And then for the pickup lane, essentially what they're doing here is they'll be cutting into the sidewalk. It would, if you were facing the store, it would be to the left of the entrance. This would be something similar to what's over at Harris Teeter right now, in between their main entrance and the pharmacy drive-through. Right now, staff does recommend approval, and then all signage would be approved separately. If there's any comments for staff, I can answer those, and then I believe the applicants are present at the meeting as well.
Any comments for Jay or Darren? I have.
And
Oh, hi. Carrie?
Thank you. Darren, just a quick question regarding the pickup lane. Is that going to be curved on the outside so they'll drive in and not have direct access out of it without continuing on through to an exit point for safety reasons? Or is that open curb open on the left-hand side of that drive-in?
So the way it's presented right now on the site plan is that it is open. There's no curb for an entrance and exit. If that's something that the board would like to see, you could recommend that be attached to it, or a condition that's attached to it.
My only concern is just for safety and access, since the flow of the rest of that plaza is to go back in that same direction. If you were going to go back over to that side of the shopping center. So I would just have a statement of comment that if all we're doing is cutting in the sidewalk and not widening the 2-lane or the actual road, and we're not curbing it, I would want some markings or the consideration of it being curbed, at least so they have to go through that chute before they can immediately veer off into potentially other traffic that might be coming across that front open area. That's all.
Mike?
Are we within the height restrictions for that peak? Did that change anything? Is there anything we need to be concerned about, or is that all within the current code?
Yeah, so that peak, can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say, I have checked it. It is under our minimum height or maximum height requirement for the district.
However, the way our, we measure building height to the top plate of the building, and signage above that is considered a roof sign, the way the code's currently written.
Even the way that this one's built? It looks more like a facade of a gable, but I don't know.
As long as it has depth, I'm not looking at the drawing right in front of me. As long as it's not just a false facade, just to raise the height of the sign artificially. Yeah, I think if that's full depth, then it should be fine. Yeah, it's low enough that the sign wouldn't be an issue.
And then one thing I will note about the height is it's actually not taken from the tip of the peak. So with peaks, from what I remember in our definitions, we do take those at more of a midpoint area.
Okay. Jay, I have a question. In your cover letter, it's mentioned that your recommendation is that we not act on this, which I assume to mean that we do have the option of just approving this without sending it to the full Board of Commissioners. Is that correct?
So yes and no. This did go through a pretty lengthy conditional zoning process about 8 or 9 years ago. And during that rezoning, there was a substantial amount of discussion about the architecture of the storefront. I have heard from at least one commissioner that felt that, given these changes to the facade and how much discussion happened at that time, that maybe this should still go back to the Board of Commissioners for review.
Okay, and that's the way I took it. The main reason I was asked is Darren said the planning team's recommendation was for approval, but the way I took your comment was like there was a whole lot of discussion, maybe some arguments involved, and since this is going to be different and maybe a little bit taller, that might be a good idea to let them handle it again.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for Jay or Darren? Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay. Darren, do you know if the applicant team has any presentation they'd like to make or any comments they'd like to make?
There's no presentation that was forwarded to me. They are in the meeting now. I'm not sure if they have any comment.
This is Scott Fertitta. I'm a development manager with At Home. Good evening, Mr. Chair and planning board members. I really don't have anything in particular to add. I think maybe a little clarity on what Jay, you were just referring to in terms of, we thought at one point that maybe it should go to the Board of Commissioners, and I think we were scheduled for that. And then it looked like maybe the appropriate way was the planning board. So I'm just not exactly sure on the process more than anything, but I'd certainly also be willing to answer any other questions that come up as well as for our elevation request. But I would maybe like a little bit of clarity on that, on the process there.
Sure. So the UDO gives, the planning board discretion to either approve administrative amendments or forward them to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay.
So it's sort of an either-or process.
And so that's what's under consideration to send it back to the Board of Commissioners as opposed to approving the elevation amendment.
Correct.
Right. And if we would decide to send it back to the full Board of Commissioners, it would go with a recommendation to either approve or disapprove.
Okay.
And it's still potentially just one additional meeting. It depends on how it goes. It's not, there's no like community meetings or rezoning notices or anything. It's not that complicated. It's just,
right. Okay.
It's another meeting.
Okay. Well, just a little overview about the changes and really the intent with that. If you're familiar with an at-home store, I think their closest one is probably Charlotte, and then I think in Pineville. So I don't know how familiar you are, but it really is primarily a branding element to show that at-house element, converting what was the former J.C. Penney. So it's just really to distinguish at home from other home decor and furnishing stores, and that look and the colors are all part of really the at-home brand. So that's the main intent, to make those minor changes to that facade and primarily that entry element, which is considered, as you can see, it's somewhat resembling a house for the at-home branding element.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
Are there any questions for Scott? Any other comments or questions for Jay or Darren? Okay. All right. Our motion can be to recommend approval or disapproval to the board, or we as the planning board can make the final decision ourselves. So do I have any motions under consideration? Natasha.
I'll motion to pass this on to the Board of Commissioners for approval.
Okay. There is a statement of consistency. I think it's
All right,
right after the cover page.
Yep. Oh, hold on. Okay, yeah. Okay. So the requested zoning action so do I read the not approved one then? Or do I?
No, the approval, but you just say recommended for approval.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. The request, so this is sorry guys. The requested zoning action is most currently amended, is recommended for approval, as has been found to be consistent with the Matthews land use plan as follows. The changes are consistent. Is that what I'm supposed to be reading? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, consistent with the land use plan as it promotes non-residential destination land uses along US 74. And it's reasonable because these changes, the proposed zoning changes do not significantly impact the intent of the original rezoning.
Okay. We have a motion to recommend approval from Natasha Edwards. Tom?
Before we get to that, can I ask a question? I thought we were voting to move this to the town board with the recommendation of approval?
That was our motion.
That's the motion.
That is the motion. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion from Natasha Edwards, a second from Tom Dorsey, and we'll start with a roll call vote with Jim Johnson.
Yes.
Tom Dorsey.
Yes.
Natasha Edwards.
Yes.
Jonathan Clayton.
Yes.
Carrie Lamson.
Yes.
And Mike Rowan.
Yes.
I also vote yes. So the vote is 7-0 to recommend approval to the full board, and they will take their final vote at their first meeting, first meeting of June, which will be second Monday of the month of June.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you, Scott. Okay. Final item on the agenda for tonight is a public improvement variance from Walking by Faith Community Church. And Darren, you're up again.
All right, 1 second. Let's scroll back down to it. Thank you, Chair. So as mentioned, this is a public improvement variance for Walking by Faith Church. So on this one, the planning board will just be making a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for approval or disapproval. The staff report for this is a bit dense, and it flows a little bit better if I walk it through, just because there's a little bit of history with it. So back in we'll start with the site. So this is the site. It's located at the intersection of Samuel and Rice Road. Currently on site, there is a pavilion. Right now, the property is zoned R15. There's no conditional districting with it, and this is a by right development. So back in 2015, the church proposed a multi-phase project, and as part of that, they requested public improvements along Samuel Road and a portion of Rice Road. Along Samuel Road, the Board of Commissioners at the time waived all of the widening of the pavement, curb and gutter along Samuel, and then back along Rice Road, they delayed the installation of curb and gutter, widening pavement, and sidewalk from a distance of about 273 feet from the intersection of Samuel back down Rice Road. In addition, they also delayed a sidewalk along Samuel. However, before phase 2 construction could begin, the church would be required to do pavement widening, install curb and gutter, and sidewalk along Rice Road outside of that 273-foot area. This was just kind of a short briefing on those changes. So what the church is asking for now in the public improvements is really just an extension of that 2015 public improvements variance. So they're requesting that the area on Rice Road, the area that was to be done before permitting began, or as part of phase 1, they're asking now that it be delayed until phase 2 begins for the project. What they're requesting is that the pavement widening and the curb and gutter be delayed until phase 2. Right now, they are still willing to put in a portion of the sidewalk. Zoom in a little bit. So that portion of the sidewalk would cross over the driveway and then run back along Rice Road back into the housing developmental or the residential area along Rice Road. So essentially what's happened with these public improvements variances is you could think of it as there's a phase 1, there's a phase 1.5, and then there's a phase 2. So with the phase 1, it would be for the pavilion, some of the parking area, and a proposed multi-purpose building with the stormwater improvements. Phase 1.5 would be the roadway improvements, which would be the sidewalk installation along Samuel Road. It would be widening of Rice Road with curb and gutter and the installation of sidewalk. And then with this new one, it would be the widening along the rest of the Rice Road with the curb and gutter. One of the things that I kind of that I noticed with this proposal is right now they are requesting, or they're willing to install the sidewalk as part of phase 1. However, they're only installing a portion of it. The 2015 public improvements variance stopped right around this area at the beginning. So there's a segment of about 100 feet of sidewalk that's missing from the proposal. We would just ask that be clarified as being included in the public improvements area, or it would be installed along with this. We'd also ask to change the wording of the public improvements variance so that instead of saying the roadway improvements are delayed until phase 2, it would match the 2015 wording where the roadway improvements are required before permitting begin, or before the building permits are issued for phase 2.
So basically the church is requesting a delay in this, what do you call it, infrastructure improvement or not, because they have they're behind or they have delayed purposefully construction of the buildings themselves.
Right, that's correct. And so what they're working on right now is this multi-purpose building. The phase one intersection approvals, those were originally delayed because there was some dispute, or I guess there was some unclarity about NCDOT's plans for Samuel Road. And so what they're requesting now is that instead of building this portion, that they extend those Rice Road delays, and then they just install the sidewalk right now as part of phase one. And then before they build their main sanctuary, they would come in and install all of the roadway improvements along Rice Road and a sidewalk on Samuel.
So really, there's not going to be an increase of traffic from any building that's going on there now anyway.
Well, there would be one new building. So right now they just have the picnic shelter that's out there, and they would be installing a 3,600 square foot multi-purpose building and the parking.
But I guess the real change would come when they build the sanctuary.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are there any questions for Darren? This one is a little complicated.
Right. And if anybody needs me to restate the current public improvements variance, I'm more than willing to do that, just because there were a lot of moving parts. Like there's so much tie in with that 2015 variance.
Tom?
So am I right? There's no time requirement. If they don't build phase two for 10 years, there's no sidewalks for 10 years. Would it be reasonable to have at some point in time when the sidewalk has to be built? I mean, the rest of the neighborhood is going to, it's not just this site here, but the rest of the neighborhood is going to maybe continue to evolve to the point where that sidewalk would be helpful.
Right. So that's correct. There's no time limit associated with this. However, we should note that the only section that we can take action on right now is the lower section of Rice Road, the portion that's furthest away from the Samuel intersection. And so right now they are proposing to install the sidewalk. However, they're just installing a portion of it. But right now, as it's shown, there's about 100-foot section that's missing, that's not shown within it's not shown in the 2015 public improvements variance, and it's not shown in this current proposed public improvements variance. It's just kind of missing. So as staff, we would like that detail cleared up as either having it included or them going ahead and constructing it up to that other limit.
So it's really undetermined who's responsible for that section?
Well, it's really more, yes, in a sense. I think the main thing, like our quick solution would be just to expand the dotted area or dashed area that's shown to include that section, and then either require it now as part of phase one or delay it until the rest of the improvements are going to be made. Right now, there's no clarity on it.
And would that clarity need to be included in anything that we decide? Or is that going to be handled separately?
If you were going, since we're just making a recommendation here, any motion or recommendation that went forward to the board, you could include something along the lines of either installing all of the sidewalk now or leaving that section and just including it when taking that gap that's in there now and including that when they go back and widen the pavement and install a curb and gutter.
Okay. Carrie?
Darren, I'm a little unclear. As I look at this drawing, when we're talking about the portion in phase 1.5 of the sidewalk that is not going to be completed, are we only talking about that section that is inside the dark bolded rectangle that is there, where there appears to be a small percentage of space that is not hashed or checked as if it's been improved? Is that what we're saying, that is not complete?
Right. So I'll zoom in a little bit. So the limits extend right about to here. So there's a portion of the sidewalk that's not accounted for on either of the public improvements variances, and it's outside of the scope of this public improvements variance. So they are proposing to build a portion of the sidewalk. However, that other half of it that's not shown here isn't represented anywhere else.
All right. Tongue in cheek, I find an organization called Walking by Faith and not having sidewalks to be somewhat of a, no, I'm sorry. So what you're asking us, if we were to make some recommendation, would be we need to define that this evening in whatever we would propose to the town. We're not trying to address the area that is outside of that highlighted rectangular area to the left that is Rice Road all the way to Sam Newell. Regardless of what we do, that isn't even being defined in phase 2. Is that correct?
Right. So it is outside the scope, or everything all of the rest of the right of way is outside of the scope of this public improvements variance. We're only talking about a small portion.
Right. The section that really appears to be what the entrance to the facility will be, and the lanes that will traverse from both directions to some point until it merges back into the remainder of Rice Road heading towards Sam Newell. Fair statement.
Right. So this would start 273 feet from the intersection of Sam Newell and Rice Road.
Right. And who has responsibility for the other 273 feet?
So right now that still falls on Walking by Faith Church. That sidewalk, as part of the 2015 public improvements variance and other road improvements, will be installed before the main sanctuary is installed or complete, or permits are issued for the main sanctuary. But that was addressed back in 2015.
All right. So again, and I apologize, I'm just confused. As I look at this drawing, there's a drive entrance in phase 1, and there's a box that has got a dash and 2 hash marks that's highlighted. It's called road improvements will be in phase 2, but it doesn't go all the way to Sam Newell. I'm referring to the section that ends at Sam Newell and isn't got any definition to it as far as improvements. Who's responsible for that?
You're talking about this area or this section?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. So Walking by Faith would be responsible for that. 1 second, let me scroll back up. So this is the public improvements variance that was approved back in 2015. You see where they've got the dashed lines.
Yes.
So all of the delays that were associated with this section of the road, these were delayed until after phase 1 began, but before phase 2 construction could start, as well as the sidewalk on Sam Newell. And so what we're looking at, or essentially what they're doing, is they're asking to take these phase 2 or these delays on Rice Road and extend them down further along the property line.
And if I can be blunt, for what purpose?
So
why is that change necessary given the phase 2 requirements to define the entire proposed project and to complete it whenever they reach that point? What is their benefit if we were to approve this? What are we giving them incrementally that they don't already have? besides time.
Can I jump in, Kerry? I think it's the multi-purpose building. I think when they wanted to add the multi-purpose building, they went outside of phase one, but they don't want to go to phase two. So adding that multi-purpose building is kind of forcing them to make a decision. Are we in phase two or are we not? Is that true, Darren?
Yeah. So right now they're still in phase one. They haven't completed the multi-purpose building and they haven't started on it. They also haven't completed any of the parking area that's associated with that. When they initially began construction, all they did was some grading on site. They installed the picnic shelter, and then I believe they did some installation for the stormwater basin. So what they're requesting now is to extend these delays before the sanctuary, so that the road widening and the curb and gutter are delayed until the sanctuary construction begins, so that they can go in and start the multi-purpose building.
I got it. I appreciate that, Jim. I mean, obviously they want to add an additional structure, and what they're asking us to do is to defer the road improvements until such time as they need the major facility begins, since there should be minimal traffic impact. And I think what confused me was that they just have an undefined section they should have finished or highlighted that would have taken it to that bolded area that was originally as part of phase two for the sidewalk and for the street improvement. And I would have had the question. So, okay.
And in the long run, they're going to do a sidewalk all the way around their property. That's just a phase two thing. There's no, we're not giving them away anything. It's just a matter of timing.
Mike?
No, but there's, okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Kerry.
What I didn't understand looking at the drawing is why it didn't go to the end of the rectangle. Why is the improvement not shown on this drawing submittal, which is the revised drawing submittal?
Right.
Why is
It could be because it's a sidewalk to nowhere right now, and they just did the one back to the neighborhood as more expedient for now.
And I'm going to agree. It looks like it is, I think what they're saying is, hey, let's do 1.5. We'll do this first part of this driveway, right? Let's make sure we get that second part put in a little. I think the whole point is to make sure that that's definitely tied to any phase two that they come upon. I think if we can shore that up, I'm okay with, doing a 1.5, getting the sidewalk up to the drive.
And we're dealing strictly here with phases and not a timeline, I assume. Not in real time, like they're going to finish phase two by X date.
Yes, that's correct. It's just the phasing of the development.
Right. It's just open right now. Okay. Are there any questions for Darren? So this is not asking for changes to anything that's there. It's just the timing. Mike, Jim.
Well, I was just going to ask Darren, so there's no packet recommendation, but do we just say we'd like to recommend that the public improvement variance be extended until phase two? Is that the recommendation we're supposed to put in?
Yeah, so I would word the recommendation back up, just for consistency. So it would delay installation of the pavement widening, the curb and gutter until before issuance of, so before issuance of building permits for phase two construction, they would need to install the pavement widening and curb and gutter. And then we would also recommend that this section of the sidewalk be addressed at some point somehow. Because again, and as Kerry kind of mentioned, this section is outside of the current proposal. So it's not being really accounted for as part of phase one or as part of phase two.
Was that accounted for in the original 2015 public improvement variant, and now it's not?
Right. So in the 2015 public improvements variance, they did agree to build the sidewalk from the edge of the property line all the way back down to those original limits. And then as part of the second approval, they're showing the sidewalk built up to the driveway and back past the driveway by about 10 feet. And then there's a section of about 100 feet of sidewalk that's missing. And it could just be that we like pull the body, or I guess extend it and just incorporate, or just make a note or mention that sidewalk, the rest of the sidewalk needs to be made with those other improvements, or installed along with those other improvements. They're being delayed.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm being dull, but so the original, to get to 1.5 and allow the multi-purpose building, they are going to build a sidewalk all the way to the driveway, 10 feet beyond, or all the way to the extent of this boxed line, if that's what we say. Is that true? To do the 1.5, they were going to do the sidewalk, 75 feet past the driveway? Is that what is that the recommendation we're trying to put in?
That they extend the sidewalk to the length, or well, it's the one or the other. It's we can either delay this portion of the sidewalk so that they install it with the curb and gutter and the pavement widening, or we can go ahead and say, or ask that they install the sidewalk with this portion of the sidewalk.
Was that portion of the sidewalk, and I'm sorry I'm slow, but the first portion that we're looking at, that's not in place now, and it wasn't required for the phase one. Is that true?
No, so it is required for phase one. So hang on, the 2015 one is a little bit better, mainly for that sidewalk, just because it's included. So the sidewalk is originally going to extend past the driveway all the way up to where the phase two improvements were. Right now, they're just installing they're just showing 10 feet beyond the driveway. So where my mouse is now, back down, is the section that they're showing. This 100-foot gap that's right here, that's missing from the plans. And there's no notes of it anywhere.
Gotcha. So we just want them to adhere to that plan, and we want to allow them to add the multi-use facility and still live within these constraints.
Right.
Question is, how do we put all that into motion?
Seems like it's simple but complicated at the same time. So
it is, because that's kind of an identified section of sidewalk there. So how do we refer to it?
Is it supposed to be there now under a phase one agreement?
Right. So what was originally approved back in 2015, they, as part of their phase one, what was originally approved back in 2015, before they're allowed to begin, or before they're able to get building permits for phase two, they would need to, as part of their phase one construction, they would need to complete.
I'm looking at it, it's supposed to be there, and it's not. And we're saying, okay, well, if you give that to us now, you go ahead and build your multi-purpose area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now they would need to widen the road and install curb and gutter, and then install the full length of the sidewalk. And then what they're proposing to build the multi-purpose, or as part of the multi-purpose building, what they're proposing is just to build a portion of the sidewalk right now to get the multi-purpose building open. And then before they build the sanctuary, they'll come back. And then I'm assuming they're going to complete that portion of the sidewalk. And then the curb and gutter and the road widening. But that portion of the sidewalk is what needed to be addressed about whether it was going to be constructed now as part of phase one or delayed until phase two.
It seems like they already agreed to install it now, so they should have done it before they did the multi-purpose building. But
it seems like they're trying to bargain with us now and kind of back off the original agreement in order to get the multi-purpose building built without having to do the other things that they've agreed to. until a later phase. Howie?
Guys, I happen to live up in that area. I pass by this lot every day, and there are a disturbing number of pedestrians that are walking in the shoulders on both Rice Road and Sam Newell. It's a relatively busy intersection. These gentlemen want to put a building in, including parking, that's going to bring traffic into an area that's been an empty lot, is not doing anything. And, from my perspective, I think the more sidewalk, the sooner the better, because I think we're creating some serious safety issues by allowing them to go to phase 2. That could be 5 years, that could be 20 years, before they get to the sanctuary. So, just something I'd like you all to think about, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Jim?
To follow up on what Howie said, I think did they open up an opportunity for us to modify the agreement from 2015? Could we ask them to take that sidewalk all the way to Sam Newell now as part of getting that multipurpose building built?
This is an entirely new request, so that could be part of Planning Board's recommendation.
So nothing that would impact Sam Newell, but we could certainly ask him to finish the Rice Road part. And I guess, yeah, go ahead.
Mike, when you say finish the Rice Road part, we're still not talking about the road widening. We're simply talking about the sidewalk. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the way I'm thinking about the sidewalk itself.
Right. And we're certain that there would be no impact on any widening in the future that could impact and that sidewalk, that it's going to be in that right of way or in that setback and be undisturbed regardless of whenever phase 2 or phase 3 or phase 8 take place?
It looks to me, if they put the sidewalk where it's shown on their drawings, there shouldn't be an issue, but they wouldn't want to put it on Sam Newell yet because based on DOT, it could change. Darren, is that correct?
That's correct. And then just to mention too, those original 2015 delays along Rice Road from the intersection past the point of 273 feet, those were delayed as well because I believe CDOT wasn't sure what they were going to do with that intersection yet. So if it were, theoretically, if it were to move or something or shift a little bit, they didn't want to go install widened pavement and then have NCDOT come back and tear any section of it back out.
So the portion of Rice Road closer to Sam Newell could be at risk if they installed it all now.
Is it reasonable to assume the sidewalk would be okay, given the current knowledge of what NCDOT is doing, though? So that would be a safe thing to do now. Is that fair?
As the sidewalks currently being proposed, or?
Yeah, the extra 273 feet that needs to get to Sam Newell. I mean, that's pretty stable as far as design right now. There's nobody that's thinking about taking some of that land away from the church and doing something, 4 lanes at Rice Road or something.
That I'm not sure of. I know NCDOT. What's that, Jake?
No, go ahead. Go ahead and finish, Darren.
I was just going to say, I know NCDOT, their funding and their projects are kind of delayed and scattered right now. So I'm not sure any timelines or anything that they may be planning to come back in.
They would have to take right away from Walking by Faith to expand it, though, at this point.
Darren, can you zoom out a little bit?
Yeah. Do you want me to pull the aerial back up?
I think it would be helpful because I was going to point out just, what's going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, Jay, didn't we just listen to a proposal on the opposite side of the road on Sam Newell and facing Rice Road?
Yeah, you're one step ahead of me. So that's what I was going to point out with the aerial. So just to the left of the subject parcel, where you see that what looks like a box, the old daycare. The board did approve the final plans for the mixed use development that is going in there along Sam Newell and between East Point and Sam Newell. They will be building multi-use path on that section of Sam Newell, but no curb and gutter, just due to the uncertainty with DOT. Well, since planning board looked at that, I don't know, when was that, last fall, maybe? Yeah. I don't recall. Things have only gotten more uncertain or worse from DOT, where as Darren was alluding to, that project may be completely off the books. It may never happen at all. The idea to put a signal in at Sam Newell Road and Rice Road and some of that widening work, that may be value engineered out of the U2509 project on 74. So, the answer is we know even less than we did 6 months ago, unfortunately. But the good thing is that you do have potential destinations. So I think sidewalk connectivity to Sam Newell is important. We have it on the south side of Rice Road, but not the north side. So there is a mixed use component that could have some destinations for neighbors.
So I guess our decision is, do we let them delay all but a small portion of the sidewalk until phase 2, the main sanctuary? Do we ask them to not only put in that portion, but put it all the way up to Sam Newell Road now? Or let them go ahead and delay?
Looking at that, there's a sidewalk all the way up Sam Newell to that intersection. So if you did run that up there, if you're on that side of the road, it does at least connect with the sidewalk heading down toward Northeast Parkway. And it's got to be there eventually. I'm a pro sidewalk guy. So at the end of the day, I'd want as many sidewalks as soon as possible. So anytime I get a chance to push that in, I will.
I'll add just 2 cents to that. I would support the same idea as Jim was mentioning, provided that we had a high probability that we understood what was going to get developed, such that this would not be a wasted investment on behalf of the petitioner. If there's still any risk whatsoever on that extra 273 feet, at a minimum, I'd want them to put the sidewalk in they agreed to in phase 1 of the 2015 variance. I don't want 10 feet. I want whatever it was they had said. And really, I'd like to look at this 2015 variances, and what they're asking us to do is put in a multi-purpose building that was in phase 2 into phase 1 and ask them to complete the rest of phase 1 as they had planned. That's the direction I'm leaning.
And for Jay and Darren, there's no way we can know that today, is there?
No, not what NCDOT's plans are at the moment.
Yeah.
One thing, just to clarify, the multipurpose building it's always been a part of phase 1. So when they initially started construction on this, I believe their intent was to install the picnic area and the multi-purpose building. And then at some point they ceased construction, and they came back to the town later with this new proposal for the right-of-way improvements.
I'm confused again then, because I'm not quite sure why they're asking us for anything. Don't they have everything already approved?
Well, they just want to delay. I think they want to delay the portion of the sidewalk back toward the back of that property near the driveway into a later phase.
Darren, the applicant's not here, correct?
No, I thought I saw them in the...
Chris Hope is here.
Yeah.
So
Aren't they also asking to delay the road improvements that were part of phase one as well on Rice Road?
Right. So they're requesting to delay.
There's Pastor Dennison.
Okay. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to listen to the conversation. To Mr. Chair and the board members, thank you all again. With respects of the sidewalk, we had planned to do those sidewalks anyway. And I say the sidewalks, we're talking about that 100-foot that was not there. That was a part of our plans. And the multipurpose building has always been a part of phase one. The reason why I believe that we got the approval in 2015 was because of the lack of information on what was going to happen on Sam Newell. And that's why we were just focused on that part of the sidewalk, connecting to the adjacent neighborhood and bringing it up to the portion where we knew that we would be in a good place. We just don't have, and I guess I can use the hardship of just, laying out funds to put something that could eventually be just torn down again. We just thought that just wasn't wise for us to do, and that's why we came back to the board. The multi-purpose building has been it has been altered so that we can do the whole multi-purpose building without the hardship of the curb and gutter right now, and we weren't even looking at Sam Newell at this particular junction because DOT didn't know what they were going to do with it. So everything that you see on there to include those 100-foot of sidewalk, the multi-purpose sidewalks, we're going to take care of that.
Just not the widening of the road.
Just not the widening of the roads.
Pastor Dennison, the audio was bad when you first logged in. It says Chris Hope on the screen. Could you just introduce yourself to everyone for the record?
I apologize. I'm Pastor Al Denson of Walking by Faith Community Church.
Thank you.
And I have with me tonight our architect, Mr. Chris Hope, and our say again. Okay, thank you. And our contractor, MCT, Mr. Nora Shepard.
I got a quick question. Since we have you here, do you have any time frame for when you would build the sanctuary for your church?
We don't have a time frame for it yet. The multipurpose building is effort to grow the ministry, also to actually provide Matthews and the surrounding area with what we want to do as for social and emotional support for our community, for those individuals who might need it, to include the church itself. So, no, we do not.
So Pastor, I think a couple things that I heard that there is some concern that you certainly wouldn't want to construct anything, sidewalk, road improvements, whatever it may be, if there's any risk of that having to be torn up and redone. And that's very understandable. Maybe some of the other reasons are more financial, and that's perfectly okay. A lot of people are looking at a different way of looking at their finances and construction and everything after the pandemic. So very understandable there. But your request really is taking that last section toward the back, I'll say, at the driveway, and moving it from phase 1 or 1.5 back to phase 2, the road portion only, or the sidewalk and the road?
The road portion. The road portion.
Road portion only. So the sidewalk would still be built during phase 1.5.
1.5, correct. It would go up to that I think 273 foot.
Right.
Right there.
So at least in my case, that's a difference in my understanding, because I was thinking the request was to push it back to phase 2.
You're correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the pastor? Okay. So we appreciate you being there, and I'm not sure how long you were there, but we appreciate you bearing with us.
Oh, no, that's no problem. Thank you all for allowing us to be here, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions now based on the pastor's comments?
Yes,
Okay, is there a better understanding of what we're being asked to approve now? I saw some smiles and that not a lot of head shaking going on. Are we at the point where someone is ready, willing, and able to make a motion? And if not, please continue to ask questions. I think we're getting closer to an understanding now. The latest that I heard is the only request is delay road improvements from phase 1.5 to phase 2.
Mike, I guess I still am confused as to what 1.5 is.
And what 1.5 includes as far as the building on the property?
What's the difference between 1 and 1.5?
So there's no actual 1.5. That was just like a quick way that I used to remember how everything was phasing. So there's only phase 1 and there's phase 2. The way that the public improvements variance worked is it delayed these improvements until they had to be installed before the building permits were issued for phase 2. And so because of that, the roadway improvements happened in between phase 1 and phase 2. And so it was like kind of a technicality, phase 1.5. So there's only phase 1 and phase 2. So we would just be delaying the roadway improvements. We would be delaying the pavement widening, the curb and gutter, and that portion of the sidewalk from phase 1 on Rice Road into before phase 2, or that they be installed before phase 2 begin.
I was pretty well grounded up until there. I thought we were going with the sidewalk completion, what we see all the way down to the front of what was committed within that box, or right outside that box, actually. And we were only backing off of the road improvements, because that makes sense to me. You're not building the sanctuary yet, which is really the key essence of what I would consider the phase 2 anyway. So we're just saying, build the sidewalk, pass to the entrance and past entrance as it is stated on that drawing.
That is correct.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So curb and gutter and road improvements.
No curb and gutter.
Go back to phase 2 prior to receiving the permits.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, it's making a lot more sense to me now. So that's really the request, to move road improvements, curb and gutter from phase 1 to phase 2, not doing anything to affect the sidewalk or any construction of buildings on the property.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions or any confusion remaining about that? Tom.
Minor confusion, just I thought we heard that the multi-purpose building proposed now was different than the original.
That's correct.
Okay, so Mike, I think you said the only changes were ABC, but that's a change from the original. So maybe the motion should just be that we approve this as submitted with clarification that the sidewalk will be extended to that 273-foot mark. Wouldn't that cover everything?
Yeah, I think it would, because we're not here to discuss if there are actually physical changes to the multi-use building. That's really not what we're here to talk about anyway.
Right.
Was that your motion, Tom?
Yes.
Good. I'll second that.
If Tom can make that a little more official, I think we can go.
Okay. So I'd like to move that we approve the request as submitted with the clarification that the sidewalk will be extended to the 273-foot mark as shown on the original plan.
And this one, I believe, is another recommend approval and not approve.
Correct.
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion from Tom Dorsey. We have a second from Mike Rowan, and we'll start with a roll call vote with Jim Johnson.
I approve.
Okay. Tom Dorsey.
Approve.
Natasha Edwards.
Approve.
Jonathan Clayton.
Approve.
Mike Rowan.
Approve.
And Carrie Lamson.
Approve.
And I also approve. So that's a unanimous vote to recommend approval of the request and move it on to the full Board of Commissioners at their first meeting of June. Okay. Thank you, Pastor. Okay.
Mr. Chair, we do have two last quick items for the board before you hit the adjourn button.
Okay, I was going to ask you about something, so you go first.
Well, go ahead and ask. What was your...
Well, in your cover letter, you had mentioned training opportunities for the board.
Mm-hmm.
My question about that is that package at $325 and any board member can make use of it?
Correct.
Okay.
So anyone could access the modules 24 hours a day, anytime for the next year.
Yeah, and that was my other question too. I would assume it was on demand, so we can go in whenever we have some time to look at it.
Yeah, they're very, very good quality. I think, as I mentioned, they're produced by the UNC School of Government. I had looked at some national level courses that a independent firm called Planetizen does, but I feel like there could be some confusion on how different states operate. So I would prefer us have training that is conducted in North Carolina. So I just wanted to open it up and see if anybody was interested in kind of taking a deeper dive.
Yeah, well, I would certainly be interested if the group would like to investigate.
Is that one yes?
Natasha? Okay.
Yeah, we did a training. I think we did a training when I first started on the board a while back, and it was really helpful. It was a one-day kind of thing back then, but I found it to be very helpful.
Yeah, so some of the few of the professors that typically attorneys that specialize in land use kind of have a traveling road show typically around the state, and they go and present to new planning board members and boards of commissioners. So this is sort of a stand-in for that. With COVID going on. And I think they do it anyway now just to make it more accessible. So yeah, I'll go ahead and purchase and we'll get you all some login credentials.
Okay, great.
For that.
Mike, I have to apologize. Was this information that was sent out to us that I missed?
It was in Jay's cover letter that Shayna sent out for the meeting.
All right. Well, I would certainly be in favor of anything that we could do on our nickel that would help us stay informed and do a better job. So I would certainly participate, Jay, as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then the second item, I actually want to turn the mic over to Nadine for an update on some things we're doing in the department.
And I'm going to make this really quick because I know it's been a long night. I just wanted to let you know that we started this week, kind of last week, this week, on a small area plan, and I'm actually going to share my screen briefly, or maybe not. Can you see the map on
Yes,
now?
yes.
So this is an area, you can see it's 485 Ottawa Road, and that's the Windrow neighborhood over here. We've been getting a lot of calls about this for development calls. The property is here is for sale. They've got a property over here that's under contract. And we just kind of want to be proactive on it and take a look at the area before there are any development approvals out there, before anyone submits, really. We're looking at right now a 5-month process, hopefully to get to the commissioners by October. And we're putting together a steering committee and would love for one of you to volunteer to be on the steering committee to kind of be the liaison to the planning board, because it'll be coming to you eventually anyway. So if we have any volunteers, go ahead and you can contact me and we can talk about what you would need to do. And again, it's just, we're going to have some public outreach. We're going to do some surveys. We're going to do some, as Jay and I call it, some eye candy kind of drawings to make it look really good for the Windrow neighborhood, probably in particular. But if you want to contact me about volunteering to be on the steering committee, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Nadine.
We should have put you at the beginning of the meeting, Nadine.
Oh, it was all very interesting anyway. It's all a learning experience.
I just have one thing to add. The poll that I sent out, planning board will remain virtual for the time being.
Okay.
All or nothing. So if 2, 3, 4, it had to be 100% full to go back in virtual based on council and town directive.
So when do we get to vote again?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I will reassess it every few months. Now, I will say the joint hearing that will be on June 14th, the board has moved to a hybrid format that will probably continue for the foreseeable future. So you all are welcome to join us in the Hood Room at Town Hall if you would like, or you can also log in via Zoom and we will bring you into the room for public hearings, so that you do have that option now if you would like to come in person to the joint hearings.
Can that always be an option?
What's that?
Can that always be an option?
Well, we are assessing that, and we've got YouTube Live now, and I think people appreciate having more options for it. It does make the town more accessible.
Well, I know some of those run so long, I go pretty much straight to bed after I get off. So that'd be actually a nice thing to be able to just not have to go to the board for those public hearings.
Well, I'll give you an example. Our citizen survey was conducted by Western Carolina University and some MPA students, and they joined us via Zoom from Cullowhee in the mountains last night, gave the presentation and took off. They didn't have to drive, 3.5, 4 hours. So there's certainly benefits for sure.
Jay, have they resolved technical issues related to doing that? Because if I'm here and I'm watching the town board meeting on YouTube Live, there's a substantial delay between what you can hear when I'm called in on Zoom and what I'm hearing through the YouTube channel. There's at least a minute or so delay or more. Is that going to occur similarly with a virtual environment? Because that was a concern initially.
Yeah, so we have made some modest upgrades to the audio video system in the room to accommodate Zoom. I'll have to ask the town clerk. I believe the intention's probably, if you just want to watch the meeting, I think you can watch it on the YouTube stream. But if you ever want to participate, you probably need to be logged into Zoom. If you're going to give public comment, or speak for or against a rezoning case, you probably need to be on Zoom and not on YouTube Live.
Well, and that's basically what I've been doing, because I only have a phone, is I've been using the YouTube channel to see the large displays and the things that are part of the diagrams of the presenters and so forth. The trouble is that it's a minute or two behind what I'm listening to on the Zoom call. So it isn't working very effectively to be able to follow along that way and be prepared at that time then to participate as we have been. That's all.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
So planning board is staying virtual. Council's hybrid. We have not been given that hybrid option yet.
Jana, do we need to let you know how we plan on participating on that, or do we just make our decision and do it?
Let me know so that I can let the powers that be know, so they can admit you into the room as a participant if you choose to stay on Zoom.
Okay.
But you know how I send out my little happy email that's pretty template and yada yada. So just reply back, let me know how you're doing it, and I'll take care of everything else.
Okay. All right. I think we've got one more thing to do, a motion for adjournment.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
That took too long.
We had a close competition.
That was close.
All right, I'll accept Jim's motion, and I think Tom and Natasha both had their hands up. So I'll accept that as a second. We are officially adjourned, and hope everybody has a nice long holiday weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
Good night.
All right, guys.
Good night,
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, guys.
Guys.